Hello folks, this is Shruti Appiah. I'm the head of product for smart contracts and I've been working on Marlowe alongside Simon for quite a while.
And I'm Simon Thompson with Pablo Lamela. I invented Marlowe and I've been working on it since then.
And today we're going to be walking through the Marlowe product suite as well as explaining some of the intricacies of the financial contracts that you can develop with Marlowe. With Malo, our vision is to democratize finance, and we're doing so by facilitating peer-to-peer agreements between any parties that want to interact with each other via financial agreement. So that's our vision for Marlowe, and we're doing so in many different ways. Some of the key foundations for Marlowe is that it is secure, it is easy to use, and we also want to focus on accessibility. Now, around security, Marlowe, the programming language, is the domain-specific language and is designed in such a way that it has properties that allow it to be secure. So it's secure by design. The second aspect is ease of use, and this is something that's really close to our heart. We create all of the products that we build with Marlowe with the end user in mind, and similarly, you'll see this in Marlowe Run as well, where every step of a financial contract is explained in very simple language, in very simple terms that anyone will be able to understand. So usability is really core to the products that we develop, and we keep different end users as well as developers in mind for each of the different products that we build. And finally, we have accessibility. Now, in order for Marlowe to be accessible to everybody in the world, we need to give them some sort of economic identity. You might be familiar that in certain countries and certain parts of the world, there is very little access to banking services, to credit, and that's because they don't have access to identity itself. However, with Marlowe, in order to participate with any kind of financial instruments, say for example you want to give a loan, say for example you want to make an escrow or a swap with somebody, then you only need to have access to a wallet, and that wallet can be either a Cardano wallet or even more instances of other wallets in the future. So that's how we are ensuring accessibility and bringing about economic identity with Malo products. And finally, I'd like to touch on how we are on our pathway to achieving 1 billion users. One of the key areas that we're also looking into is by facilitating some sort of network adoption and by harnessing the power of network effects, because truly Marlowe is one of the models that utilize a network model in order for it to be useful even. So the more and more participants participate in the Marlowe network and run financial instruments on the Marlowe network, the more it will also scale, the more the entire network will also be adopted. The second one that I'd like to focus on is also referral programs. Now, this is similar to building a network. We're just introducing more nodes to it. And we will be introducing referral programs that will allow for any kind of users to refer their friends to participate in the Malo contracts. And the next one is more organic, and that's through partnerships. So within the Malo team, we have been speaking with several different vendors, several enterprises, as well as certain kinds of companies such as neobanks that will allow us to build partnerships with them in order to utilize the users that these companies already have and be able to bring Marlowe to the rest of the world. Similarly, we also want to emphasize on the Malo for Enterprise play, which is really an opportunity in terms of lowering the barrier to entry for enterprises to enter to be able to participate in smart contracts. And finally, domain-specific languages are also very key. So Malo itself is a domain-specific language. It is designed for finance. So you'll see that most of the standards and most of the algorithmic types that we use within Marlowe are according to financial standards. So the one that we use for Malo is Actus. It's the algorithmic contract types for financial systems. And similarly, we want to expand our domain-specific languages also into other domains such as supply chain, legal as well, where we can actually mechanize legal code in order to make the mechanization as well as the auditability of those types of contracts in a much faster and easier way. And with all of this, we are aiming to achieve and reach 1 billion users, but we have to maintain that foundation of usability, security, as well as accessibility. Thank you. Over to you, Simon.
Thanks. Okay, so let me just talk about what lies at the basis of this. What is a financial contract when we look at it in its simplest terms? What we have is a model where we have a number of participants, and what those participants can do is put money into the contract, and as the contract evolves, it can move in different directions. For example, participants can make a choice. Do I want it to go in this direction or this direction? Do I want to take my money out, or do I want to put more money in, for example? It can also react to external circumstances. It can take information from an oracle and on the basis of that decide to do one thing or another, or tune its payments according to the oracle. And finally, what it can do is it can make payments out. So payments into the contract, choices, oracles, payments out. And one final component is tokenization. We represent a role in a contract by a token. So you can, when you have the token, you can play that role. When you want to give that role to somebody else, you can do it simply by transferring that native Cardano token to the other person. So that's the essence. A small number of operations can be put together, and that's what Marlowe allows you to do. Now let me dive a bit deeper into the engineering of Marlowe. First of all, how does Marlowe sit with the other components on a node? Well, we have Plutus as a general purpose language for smart contracts. It's just been released onto the Cardano network as part of the Alonso hard fork. Marlowe sits on top of that. It's a special purpose language sitting on top of a general purpose language designed to be easier to use for its target audience, namely those who want to write financial contracts. However, it's embedded, just as Plutus is, in Haskell. So if you wish, you can create Marlowe contracts in Haskell, you can use Marlowe from within Plutus, and so on. So it's inside that wider ecosystem. And also, it's linked to the outside world. It's linked to people's wallets so that you can spend crypto assets using it. It's linked to oracles and choices from participants. So that's how it sits alongside the other components. Let's dive a little deeper and think about what implementing Marlowe means. We have our model of payments in and out, choices and so on. But what does that mean in practice when you run a Marlowe contract on Cardano? Well, first of all, there are transactions put onto the blockchain, and part of the operation of a Marlowe contract is to validate transactions that are meant to be a part of a Marlowe contract, validate those when they're put on chain. So we check on chain that the things that should happen are indeed valid operations of the contract. But that's not the only thing that's going on. The blockchain is essentially passive. It receives transactions and it validates them when it receives them. But where are those transactions created? That has to be off-chain. So in particular for Marlowe, we have the Marlowe Run client app, which together with, linked up with the other bits of technology like the PAB, Plutus Application Backend, and ultimately with users' wallets such as Daedalus or Yoroi, or indeed any other light wallet, using that part of the system, we can create the transactions that are then submitted and verified on chain. So you can see there's a two-way traffic. We create transactions and put those onto the blockchain. There's also traffic in the other direction because we have to watch for other participants sending in transactions which are relevant to the contract we're running. So two of us running a contract, the other person, it might be their turn to do something, so we have to watch the chain for their actions. So there's information moving on-chain, off-chain, and back on-chain. So that gives you a picture, I think, about what's going on under the hood, how we fit with Plutus, and how we have both on-chain and off-chain operations. Now, Shruti is going to say a tiny bit more about the product side of things and the various aspects of that.
Thanks, Sam. All right. So the Malo product suite is really composed of many different products, and each of those products are tailored to a different set of users. So all of this actually lays in the foundation of the domain-specific language, which is a programming language that's called Marlowe, that Simon and folks developed quite a while ago. Now, with the products within Marlowe, we have several products. The first set of products, which is Marlowe Build and Marlowe Play, are tailored towards developers. Marlowe Build is a place where users can basically go in and they can compose contracts, they can compose financial contracts as smart contracts. And so they will be able to build that either directly in code, such as they can use Haskell, JavaScript, or a number of other ways to build it. They can also do it in visually using Blockly, and they can also do it in an embedded fashion. Secondly, Marlowe Play is a platform where basically any kind of contract can be simulated in an interactive fashion. So you will be able to kind of get a god's eye view of a contract as it runs amongst multiple participants. The next thing that we come to is Marlowe Market. Now, Marlowe Market is really a place where people can upload as well as download any sorts of financial instruments that exist within there. So simply put, it is a smart contract template library which consists of many different types of financial instruments, all expressed as smart contracts. Now, what we have done so far is we've already developed quite a few different types of financial instruments such as escrows, swaps, CFDs, as well as certain types of loans, so such as zero coupon bonds. And those are already existing within several of the Malo products. But what we want to do is we want to open source this entire effort and allow for developers to also contribute their own financial instruments and their own complex, maybe even more custom financial instruments by themselves. And so that's what Marlowe Market is, where developers can basically contribute any kinds of financial smart contracts that they would like. And on the other hand, end users will be able to benefit from it by basically downloading it and using it for their own purposes. Now, you might be asking, where do end users actually interact with these contracts and how can they actually execute them? And that's where Marlowe Run comes in. Marlowe Run is a platform where any kind of end user is able to execute peer-to-peer financial instruments with any kind of peers that they choose. So they can either do it with somebody that they already know or anyone whose wallet address they may be familiar with, right? So, and all of these contracts will be off the shelf, right? So they wouldn't have to have much familiarity with the blockchain. They also wouldn't have to build the contract themselves because they can take the contract off the shelf from sources like the Marlowe Market, or even within Marlowe Run, we provide a list of very simple contracts. So they are able to do so in any off-the-shelf fashion, and we also ensure that usability is really key for this type of a product. So every step of the contract will be executed in a way that is explained very clearly to the user, and so the user very well knows what kind of a contract they're getting into, and every step of the way is explained to the user. And finally, we move on to Malo Enterprise. Now, this is the area where we really want to target larger enterprises as well as smaller businesses where digitalization might be really key. Now, we can either build custom instances for these types of businesses because they might not even have any legacy systems in place, so there is a lower barrier to entry for us to be able to implement any kind of digital ways of contracting. So this provides automated contracting on one hand. And then on the other hand, we have expansion of domain-specific languages. Certain enterprises as well as governments have requested that domain-specific languages, specifically as they pertain to legal domains, are quite useful to them because that removes all of the effort that goes into the process of auditing, as well as auditing any kind of smart contract, as well as just additional auditing, because all of the parameters as well as the logic of that contract needs to match up. So mechanization of the legal code is something that we're looking into with an expansion of other domain-specific languages. And besides that, we're also looking into supply chain domain-specific languages. Now, I'll hand over to Simon for a few thoughts on usability as well.
Okay, so first of all, one of the ways that we try to make Malo accessible to as many different types of user as possible is that we allow people different ways of writing Malo contracts. You can write them as text, as you would write any other type of computer program, But we also allow you to write them or to build them by assembling blocks together. And you can see this is no code, if you like. You fit the blocks together, and the blocks will only fit together in ways that work. So you can't write anything that is not a valid contract using the visual notation. And that's a great way to learn the capabilities of Marlowe. And then maybe once you've done that, you want to move on. If you want to write something larger, you can also use versions of Marlowe that are embedded in JavaScript and Haskell. So you can use the programming facilities in a language you're familiar with to help you write readable, concise, reusable components that you can put together to build your ultimate Marlowe contract or suite of contracts. So we give usability, allowing different kinds of users to move into using Marlowe in the way that is most comfortable to them. Now, Shruti already mentioned that we provide a very explicit model of what's been going on when you run a contract in Marlowe Run. You see, through a series of cards, you see each step that has been taken in the contract by each participant. And so you're able to run backwards and forwards through the steps. You're able to see who has done what choices have been made. And that's preserved in the history of the contract. When the contract finishes, you still keep that for audit purposes. And finally, what we have is the ability to do a static analysis of Marlowe contracts. And what I mean by that is that without running a contract, we can check how it will behave in every possible eventuality. So if you think of it as a tree of possibilities, what you have is you're able to run down every branch in that tree and check, without running the code, whether it will behave as you would like it to. So for example, we can check, without running it, whether any payment the contract is expected to make will be honoured in full, or whether it's possible there won't be enough money in the contract at that point to make the payment. And we can check that entirely without running a contract. Now that's just one way that we can give people assurance about how the contract behaves. But I think it's worth saying from the start, we've designed, because we have a special purpose language, we've designed out a whole lot of errors from the start. Marlowe contracts can't run forever by design. Marlowe contracts can't hold on to any assets when they terminate by design. So two classes of error that you could get in a general purpose Plutus contract are simply not there to be performed. You can't write a contract with those bad properties. Secondly, you can validate. There's always a problem when you write a contract or a program. Have you written the program you wanted to write? And one way you can validate that you have indeed done that is to simulate. You can step backwards and forwards, take a few steps in a contract, move back a few steps, take another decision, take another path. And doing that allows you to get a sense that what you have written is what you intended to write. Thirdly, what we can do is the sort of testing that I talked about before. We can analyse all possible executions of a contract. And finally, because we're based on a functional programming language, it's very straightforward, or relatively straightforward, for us to write formal mathematical proofs that contracts have certain properties. Now, we've not done that as yet, but what we have done is we've been able to prove that the system, the way that our language is designed, has certain properties so that we can be sure, for example, that the way we do the analysis is mathematically well-founded, the way we check every path, and we've done that using machine-assisted proof. So I think what we're getting from Marlowe is these different levels of assurance from the language, from its design, and from the sorts of validation we can perform. So that's where we're at. What's coming next? We're releasing the Marlowe Run distributed prototype for you to try out by the summit or very, very shortly afterwards. We're by the end of the year, expecting that it will be running on Cardano itself. That requires us to integrate with wallets, to integrate with the with light wallets, and also with the wallet back end. But we foresee doing that by the end of the year at the latest. And then longer term, we'll be rebuilding, revising what we have in the Marlowe playground. And then finally, we'll be releasing the Marlowe market. We see those things as coming in 2022. So a lot happening now, a lot happening through the next year. And the place to go to find out about this and keep track with what's going on in Marlowe is the malofinance.io website. So that's the place to look. But there's also a demo of Marlowe Run coming up, so stay on the line and you can watch that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, folks.